This is a quick explanation in case you're not terribly familiar with Google Spreadsheets or with Excel. First, to get us started, you can see my mouse and you'll be able to hear it when I click. And then when I'm holding down the mouse, you'll see that circle as you do now around it. So that's how you tell what my mouse is doing. Okay, first thing I want to do here is I'm going to increase the size just to make everything a little bit easier to see. And then I'm going to rename the file. So if I come up here to where it says Untitled Spreadsheet, you'll see it says Rename. So I can click there and type in what I want to call it. Try Example Sheet. And you can go up to this cell. This is cell A1. The cells are named by their columns, which are letters up here, and their rows, which are numbers here. So that's A1. This is cell B1. This cell is A2. And anytime you're in a cell, you can just type in things. So there I've just typed something in. You can expand the cells by pulling on the boundary between columns or same between rows so that whatever you're typing will fit into the cell. So we can type things directly in. That can be numbers or whatever we want. There I've just typed in a 2. You can also type in equations. So if I go to a cell and I type equal, it'll be up here in the command line. That tells Google that I want it to calculate something. So after I type in the equal, I can type in any kind of equation I want. Say 2 plus 6 times 12. And you'll see you get different colors here. So the numbers are in blue, the operations are in black. And when I press return, if I'm done typing my formula, Google will go ahead and calculate it for me. So different ways to get numbers in. In general, you want to go with the formulas and make Excel do all of the math for you to save yourself time and to eliminate the likelihood that you'll make mathematical errors. Okay, so then let's get some data. And in addition to doing calculations, Excel also, or Google Sheets, they're the same thing basically, has some formulas. So I'm going to do equals, and then I am going to type in RAND. And you see that brings up a couple of different choices here. These are different functions that Google Sheets already knows about. And I'm going to use this one, a random number between 0 and 1. And I am going to, because it is a function, open the parentheses and close the parentheses. You can see it's already selected the number it's going to be, and when I press return, it'll spit out a number between 0 and 1. And if I want to, I can now extend this to other cells. So I'll click on it. You'll see you have a blue outline and then little blue blocks here. If I hover my mouse over that, it'll turn from a little mouse pointer to a plus sign. Click down and then drag. It'll fill all of these cells with random numbers. And you see if I click on any of them, I'll get the same random function in there. So that's how you do functions. There are other functions. For example, if I go up here and type in equals and then pi, that'll give me the number pi. Open the parentheses and close the parentheses. I got pi. And the reason the parentheses are there are in case you want to do a function where you need some input. So I'll do equals and sin for sign. And I'll open the parentheses, and now I get to put something inside. I'll put some input into this function. So I click on this cell, A4, which is equal to pi, and that's the argument that I'll stick inside of my sign function. And then I'll close the parentheses, press enter, and it'll execute it. You also know that every single time I do a new function up here, my random numbers change. And that's because this function here, Google Sheets will keep executing it every single time I'm doing anything else on the sheet. And that's nice, but let's freeze those numbers. So I'm going to click and highlight them all, do a right click or a control click. That'll bring up all of these options. I'm going to copy and move over here to a new column. I'll do control click again and do paste special, and I want it to paste the values only, so that just the numbers. If I wanted the random function again, I'd choose this option. That'd put the formula in, but I just want the numbers. So I'll click there. And now, even though, well, they used to be the same numbers, they aren't anymore. But now when I click on this, you'll see it's a number up here in the command line, versus if I click over here, it's that function again. So difference between numbers that will change every time we re-execute this function versus numbers that are just now numbers because I pasted them as numbers. So we'll call this column some more data. There we go. And you see that the random numbers all changed again. Open this up and then say maybe I don't want quite so many figures here. I could highlight everything and then go up to these two buttons. This is decrease the decimal places and that one's increase. So I'm going to decrease, click here. There we go, get fewer decimal places, can narrow my column a little bit. And now we can do some more calculations. So let's do this column will be 2 times column B. And I didn't put an equal sign in there, so it's going to treat this just as text. So it'll stay there. And then I can do equals 2 times this entry right next to my column C in column B. You'll see it knows the cell by name, B7. 2 times that column, I'll press enter. It'll do the math for me. And now I could type that formula again in each one of these cells, or I can do this. Click on the cell, do the same thing I did with the random numbers, drag it down, or I can put here, hover my mouse right above that little square and do a double click. And it'll automatically go all the way down to the neighboring cell, to the neighboring column. So there we go. Now we've done our column. Maybe instead of hard coding in this 2, so typing the 2, we want to use this 2 here, the one that's in cell A2. We can do that as well. So I'll click on this, bring the formula up. I'll go into the command line, delete my 2, and then click on the cell A2. And you see it says A2, that's B times 7 times, cell B7. And we return, get our number back, and then we can do the same thing. Double click here, send it all the way down the column. Oh, yes, we have to click and drag. All right, and then you see something dreadful has happened. There's an error. So it's telling us something, don't really know. All right, so let's figure out what happened here. Google's trying to tell us with this error sheet, but maybe that's not very clear to you. So we'll click here and put our cursor in the cell, and you can see it'll color code the cell names, and then it'll color code themselves, so you can see which data it's using. So that looks good. Let's go to the next one. When I click here, you can see the 2, what used to be this cell, it's now moved down because of course we dragged it down. So we do want B8 to switch down. It was B7 when we were calculating the stuff in this cell. Now we want it to be B8, but we don't want the A, we don't want the 2 value to change. So here's how you fix that. Go up here, and whatever you don't want to change, which in this case, we always want it to be A2, whatever you don't want to change, you put a $sign in front of. So we're going to put a $sign in front of A and a $sign in front of 2. And now, when I click and drag, you can see that takes care of the problem. So if I just select a random cell here, click in the command line, you can see it's using this bit of data from the B column, but it's still back and multiplying it by cell A2. Now, why it's worthwhile to do all of your math in the spreadsheet rather than typing it in the numbers themselves is because, say I'm like, oh, I don't actually want to multiply this by 2, I want to multiply it by 5. Then what I can do is, instead of going through and changing every single one of these, I can just change that. And all of these will change automatically to be multiplied by 5. So this is really great if you make a mistake and you put things in formulas, then you just have to change one cell rather than changing a whole bunch of cells. All right, so that's how you use some formulas. Now let's go ahead and put in a chart. So I'm going to do insert, come down here to chart, wait a little bit. It says there's no data here, but that's fine. We will come over here to setup. You don't probably want a column chart, so I'm going to scroll down right now. Usually in physics we want a scatter chart. We have our x-axis, So I am going to move the chart over so I can see all my data again. I'll click on the x-axis, select a data range, click in there, and then I'm just going to click and drag over all the stuff I want to be the x-axis, which in this case is the stuff in column B. You can see it shows up B7, so B7, that's where we want to start, that's good. To B15, that's the last one, that's where we want to end, so that's all good. We'll say OK. And then we need to figure out what we want to be our Y data. And instead of calling it Y data, Google Sheets calls it series. So I'm going to click there, and if I click on this symbol right here, that'll say select a data range. That gets me to where I was before. I click there, and then I click and drag over all the data I want to be my Y data. And again, you can see it's now column C from 7 to 15. That's what we want. We press OK, and there all our data is. Drag it over. You can see it's a little messy, but you know, it's there. Next thing we can do, if we go over to Customize, click on Chart Axes and Titles. Let's give our chart a title. It'll be the example graph. You can see it shows up here. It's also good to put horizontal axes. So we'll call this one horizontal label. And of course, vertical. There we go, and it'll show up as well. And then maybe what we want to do is perhaps fit a trend line, and that's going to be in our Y, or what Google is calling series. So I'll click on series. You can see it's the blue dots, those guys, so that's good. Data series 1. If I scroll down, there's trend line. I can click trend line. You can see we've got a line here now, and if I keep scrolling down, there'll be a label. But I would like to put the equation there. If I close out the editor, you can see, there we go. There's my equation for this light blue trend line, and it's the equation we expect. This guy is very small, very close to 0, but the slope is 5, as it should be, because when I made this data, I multiplied everything in this column, which is my X data. I multiplied it by 5 to get my Y data, which is this column over here. So we'd expect when we ask Google Sheets to fit this data, it would have a slope of 5. So that's how you use different functions. I'm going to show you 2 more functions in addition to what you've already seen. So up here we have the function pi. Over here we have the random number function. We can do some equations here. If we wanted to, we could add, say, 4, or even better, we could add this particular value, that cell there. We're going to do the same thing. We want to keep just this cell. We don't want to drag it down when we spread this to all the other data. So I'm going to put a $sign in front of what I want to stay the same. And then I can drag it down on all my way data. And again, you'll see the nice thing about using Excel is it'll just update the graph automatically if it's tied to cells here. And again, I'm calling it Excel rather than Sheets, but mostly they're the same thing. And then I can change what is going to be the intercept here. Let's change it to 2. And it'll automatically change everything here, and it'll change your graph as well. And even change the fit. Yep, it's 5 plus 2 now for the slope and the intercept. All right, so the other 2 functions that I wanted to show you. You've seen them already in a previous video, but they're super important. One of them is average. So I can type in average, open the parentheses, and then click and drag over all the data I want to be in my average. Close the parentheses and press enter. It'll calculate the average. We'll go ahead and label that. You can also calculate the standard deviation, and that is $STDEV. We have to open the parentheses again, click and drag over all the data that we want to include in the standard deviation, close the parentheses and press return, and then I guess count is also a useful function, so we'll do that one too. Equals count, open the parentheses, click and drag over all the cells we want it to count, close the parentheses, and press return. So that hopefully gets you started on how to do Google Sheets. One thing to keep in mind is it does have this very nice little help button here. So you can type in things that you want to do, or you can go to the website Sheets Help here. So if ever you run into a problem where you want to do something on Sheets but you don't know how, you can always try that. Or of course, you can ask me.